So I went to see John Charles, a healer. And then I might tell you about what John Charles did with me, I might say. And so John Charles asked me to tell him a little bit about what was going on in my life, you know. And I did. And then he brought me into his room, and he put a sheet over me. And he got an iron skillet, and he filled it up with all kinds of stuff. And he set it on fire. And then he put it under the sheet, and he almost killed me. I almost asphyxiated. But he must have known when to pull off the sheet. Because just as I thought I could take it no more, he did. And then he took his eagle wing and he patted me down. And then he blew stuff on me and he sucked out something bad from my body. And then he said a prayer and sang a song. And then he gave me an eagle feather with a little pouch of medicine and said, tie this to the rear view mirror of your pickup truck and it'll keep this from coming back. And then he gave me some ribbons and he said, tie this to the front of your house and it'll keep this from sneaking back into your house. And I said, okay. And I did. And, and then he gave me a little prescription bottle full of smudge, special smudge. It was from the medicine that the doctor gave him that he didn't take, that he just dumped out, and so he could use the bottle. And he said, and burn this every day, and you'll be better. So I told, and so that's a vignette about my healing experience, right? And so I did all that, and then my knee got better, and I went back and saw him one more time, and he did more stuff like that, and it got all better. And by the time I saw my son over Christmas, I could ski again. So, so that's a story, right, about my pain and suffering, about the pain in my knee. And do you see how it's a string of vignettes? And there's a plot there. The plot is something like this. I got a bad knee, and I didn't want it, so I went to a healer, and he decided it was some kind of a curse, and he took something out of me and gave me protection, and my knee got well. So there's the plot. So all of you could come up with a plot, something similar as you talked about your suffering and your pain, right? And it would make it come alive for us, and it would come alive in a really different way than if I said, my knee swelled. My knee swelled up to twice its usual size, and it hurt to walk. And 3 weeks later, it was better. Right? That's sort of boring. That's not a very good story at all. But that's, unfortunately, that's mostly what medical histories sound like. They don't really want the richness of your story, which is too bad for them, because it's a lot more fun to get the story than it is to hear the facts. So, so what I'm after now with you is the notion that there's a spirit behind your suffering and pain. In this case, John Charles' story was that there was a human being behind my suffering and pain, and that somebody cursed me, which made sense given what was going on in my life at the time. And his prescription also was to pray for that person. He said the best way to turn back a curse is to pray for the one who sent it to you. And so that was part of the prescription, but I left that out of the initial story. You see, because whenever we're telling stories, it's always to an audience. You're my audience. If you're telling a story of your suffering and pain, it's always to an audience, even if the audience is your cat, or the audience is your best friend, or your mother, or your healer. It's always, and so you have to pick vignettes that will appeal to the audience. And you also have to guess the time frame for a story. So let's say you're at a bar with some friends. You can't tell an hour story. They'll get pissed off, right? You've got about 4 minutes, I think, usually. If you're out with friends, you've got about 4 minutes to tell your story. Is that about right, you think? You're out at a bar with your friends, you've got about 4 minutes. It could be longer, it could be shorter, depending on your friends. But you can't take an hour. So you've got a certain framework. The audience expects a certain length. You know, if you go to the theater in New York, or Vermont, I guess, and the play lasts 10 minutes, they're going to be pissed off. They're going to say, wait a minute, I didn't get my money's worth here. That was $75 for that ticket. I want at least 2 hours of entertainment, right? They want at least 2 hours of entertainment. You go to a movie, and it's an hour, you might feel a little ripped off. You say, hey, it should be at least an hour and 40 minutes. If it's a cartoon, I could let it pass if it's an hour and 40 minutes. Maybe an hour and a half. But an hour, well, I'm feeling a little gypped here. Because it's a big production to go to a movie. You have to get up, you have to put your clothes on, you have to get into your vehicle or ride your bicycle, you have to pay for the ticket. You know, it's a hassle to go to a movie. And so you want your money's worth. And so if you're making a movie, then you know it has to be about 2 hours. Unless you're making a documentary for PBS and then an hour or half an hour, right? And if you're putting on a play, probably it's going to need to be a couple hours, unless it's a series of one-act plays. And then you can get away with half an hour. But the audience is still going to want about 2 hours of entertainment. You see? And we automatically know stuff like that. We know that. Because it's common sense. You know, that's called cultural competence. Because we know about how long to talk. So anyway, I was telling you that story, and I wanted to keep it relatively short to keep your interest. And I chose vignettes to match the length that I thought I had. And I left out the part about praying for the one who sent the curse. And I kind of left out a lot about the curse because it wasn't necessarily relevant. It's relevant to me, but it's not necessarily relevant to the story. So I can be selective in how I tell my story. So the spirit behind the illness in this case, in John Charles's way of thinking, would be the person sending the curse or the spirit who delivers the curse. Because the curse has to be delivered. It just doesn't, once you curse someone, it just sits there until there's a delivery vehicle. So, but what if my knee had stayed sick or bad or swollen for a year? Then the story would be taking on a life of its own. Then it would slowly but surely build itself up into an entity. I could give it a name. I could call it arthritis, or I could call it Fred. You know, it's equally real, I think. So I could give it a name, and I could begin to think about some entity that's behind my swelling and pain, keeping it fueled. And I could begin to believe that there's some energy or being behind this suffering and pain who's perpetuating it or fueling it. And over time, that might be more important by far than running on the treadmill when I probably had a little parvovirus B19, which is associated with knee swelling, by the way. So it begins we say in English, it takes on a life of its own.